And to discuss this further, we're now being joined by Adil Shetty, Chief Executive Officer and co-founder of BankBazaar.com, live from Mumbai. Thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast.
Great to be here.
Mr. Shetty, what measures should the budget include to encourage digital financial inclusion?
So, India's done a very interesting and good job with building digital public infrastructure like UPI, like Aadhaar. Sometimes, we don't realize it, but it's today become ubiquitous and it's helping millions and millions of people, right? Running small kirana shops, collecting payments, using that data to be able to access other services like credit. And I think the time has come now for the next generation of digital public infra. So the success of UPI and Aadhaar can now build to the success of digital public infra around data. So today what we're seeing is AI is changing the world. In order to automate and enable small businesses and consumers to get access to credit, you need access to their bank statements, you need access, consent-driven access to their tax records. So we're saying three things need to be done. So firstly, we need to enable fintech companies to be able to work with digital public infra. So traditionally, it's been just large banking institutions which can integrate with these digital public infra. But today we have registered fintechs with SROs. Can they integrate and start using this digital public infra effectively? Second, we talk about investment in physical infra, 11.11 lakh crores. Can we invest in digital infra, the next generation of DigiLocker, the next generation of account aggregator, the next generation of a national fraud database to prevent payments fraud in the country? So there's a case to be made that we need to invest as much and talk as much about digital infrastructure as we talk about physical infrastructure. And lastly, MSME and enabling MSMEs on digital infra. So today we know DigiLocker has 200 million Indian consumers, but can we have MSME data, registration certificates, tax documents, can that be available on DigiLocker? Can MSME KYC be done faceless? So I think there's a big opportunity in taking MSMEs today, right, where consumer credit is at with digital public infra.
Right. It's interesting that you mentioned that, Mr. Shetty, because I was just going to come to this and just for better understanding of this, how are you expecting the upcoming budget to help businesses, especially, as you mentioned, MSMEs?
So from the MSME side, right, I think access to credit is one big need. I think, maybe easing some of the tax burden is a second need. When it comes to access to credit, I think the key, right, is to work on innovation. So gone are the days where we said that to give access to credit to every MSME, you need to build a branch or you need to have, an office in every town or village. Those days are gone. Today, right, how do we enable securely these MSMEs to authorize consent-based sharing of their registration documents, of their KYC, of their income statements? And how can fintechs and banks automatically underwrite and make a cash flow based loan available in minutes, right? So I think there's a big opportunity in terms of simplifying access to credit, and that's going to be built on Gen 2 digital public infra and simplification of some of the KYC requirements for MSMEs. So I think that's one important thing that needs to be done. Secondly, everyone, whether it's the middle class or MSMEs, is saying that tax collected has been rising and tax buoyancy has been very good. So now can we look to give some benefit by rationalizing tax rates, right? So, for example, obviously, startups are also MSMEs, right? What we're asking for is a lot of wealth is created via ESOPs. But yet today, ESOPs are taxed at perquisite tax rates, which is similar to your income tax rate. Should not they be taxed at capital gain rate, where the perquisite tax is rationalized to the capital gains tax? Can we do something in terms of for registered Udyan MSMEs within certain revenue bands? Can we ease the corporate tax burden? So I think everyone's looking at both a combination of innovation, because gone are the days where the solution to every problem was subsidy. I actually believe the solution to problems today is easing the cost of doing business, right? Using tech, using digital public infra. And second, can we get more money into the hands of consumers and MSMEs via tax rationalization?
And of course, there's been a lot of discussion around this as well, how the middle class, they need relief through revised tax slabs, as you were mentioning as well, reduced rates to revive demand. However, widening the tax base is equally crucial. Currently, less than 7% of Indians file returns, with 60% reporting zero taxable income. That being said, how do you think a fairer tax design can be achieved?
So you're right. The tax burden is skewed upon a minority number of payers in India. What we do believe, right, is that the tax slabs need to take into account the inflation that's happened for the last 3, 4 years. So let's say the highest tax band, and today the new tax regime, by the way, is the most popular regime in India. So 72% of last year's tax filing happened in the new regime. But yet the top tax slab starts at 15 lakhs, and this was set in 2020. But inflation has obviously kicked in, right? And if you inflation adjust 15 lakhs, it's at 18 lakhs today. So I think what needs to be done to ensure we widen the tax base, but yet offer relief so that people have more money in their hand to drive consumption, is let's at least account for the inflation adjustment of all our tax slabs. Let's look at what the data is saying. We've seen the popularity of ELSS fall off. In the Bank Bazaar Aspiration Index, we found that people's interest in term life insurance, people's interest in certain categories that they used to do previously because of the exemption is now reducing. So what we're seeing is a very innovative approach. Maybe this year is not the right year, maybe it'll happen next year or the year after. But we have started introducing simplified exemptions for investment, savings, home loan. Can we introduce something like that in the new tax regime? So just say that, hey, if you're investing in a home, if you're saving in term life insurance, if you're doing an ELSS, we'll give you a flat 30%, or not a flat up to 30% basis the saving and investment in the new tax regime. So we think, yes, we need to widen the tax base, but we also need to take into account that A, inflation is eating into people's income. And secondly, that we need people to save. We need people to have term life insurance. We need people to have long-term mutual funds. And how can we use the latest data to take those corrective action?
Right, absolutely. Mr. Shetty, I would also now like to introduce our correspondent Dharamjot Kaur, who is joining us live from Vijay Chowk. Dharamjot, thank you so much for joining us. Mr. Shetty was just discussing the tax burden and how perhaps India could achieve a fairer tax design. We were discussing this earlier as well, Dharamjot. I just want to ask you again, what's your outlook on that and expectations for the incoming budget?
Well, Haim, like I mentioned before, the middle class, the salary class of India is one of the fastest growing segments in the country, and it accounts for over 30% of India's population. So clearly, a lot of people have expectations from the kind of announcements that will come in with the budget in just a few minutes from now. Two very clear things that we've been talking about since yesterday. One, of course, as analysts have been correctly pointing out, and people also have been talking about it, is a relief in the taxation slabs. Now, to put it very clearly, there's a basic exemption limit under the new tax regime of up to 3 lakhs. As I mentioned before, under the old tax regime, it's 2.5 lakhs, but both still continue to exist and coexist with each other. So that's number one. Number two, will there be any change in the tax slabs to ensure more money in the pockets of the salaried class? Number three, will the old tax regime finally have an expiration date? Will the two regimes be merged together? Is that an announcement that's expected? Because in the last budget session, there was no clarity given as to when this will happen. So there are certain expectations that the finance minister will give some clarity on that front as well. Whether or not it happens, it remains to be seen. Other than that, the middle class, Haim, as everyone has been talking about it, it does expect relief not just on the front of the income tax that it pays, but also with respect to other schemes. Retail investors want certain relaxations. They want simplification of process for tax filing, for investment, across the board, all sort of processes that are involved for the salaried class. The other thing is all the indirect taxes that we pay, Haim, that the middle class pays, because people find themselves stuck, in the middle of the two ends. So essentially, the bottom line of this entire conversation is that people want to be able to see more money in their pocket, whether that's through relief on the income tax front, whether that's through relief in, later in the future via GST. Those are some questions that people are hopeful for and seeking answers to.
All right. Mr. Shetty, coming back to you, thank you so much for staying on with us. I want to ask you, what role do you see the government in streamlining regulations and providing incentives for the growth of startups, particularly, as you were mentioning earlier, in the fintech space?
So, Him, like you said, startups and MSMEs are the bedrock of the Indian economy, right? And I think artificial intelligence, innovation, India's future is going to be built on these, right? Yes, we have to have safety nets, but India, a young population, very comfortable, the tech capital of the world. I think there's incredible amount that we can do in terms of innovation in the economy. So we're asking the government to consider how it can build a enabling policy environment. So firstly, the RBI put out a report saying in 2025, 20% of the Indian GDP is going to be digital. How do we make sure that these new startups, these fintechs flourish, right? Whether it's when we design a policy like the DPDP, we think about how it's going to affect startups. When we build new tax regimes, I spoke in detail about ESOP. A lot of startups are creating wealth in ESOPs, right? Can we treat ESOPs and tax perquisite in the same way we tax assets? The second, we spoke about the investment in digital public infra. Only the government can do this. We've been great at Aadhaar, we've been great at UPI, but now can we do the same thing with DigiLocker, with account aggregator, with simplification of video KYC? Today India has integrated PAN and Aadhaar, right? Can we make this information available to fintechs, make this information available to banks by saying that there's an API on which you can check the integration of these two? So I think what the government has to do is truly recognize and encourage, whether it's in a policy making forum, saying what we're putting out there, how is it going to encourage and grow startups? We should also encourage, I believe, our large corporates, right? Because these are the companies which partner with startups. How do we set up long-term partnerships, right? How do we make sure that if startups are providing 2 lakh, 3 lakh new jobs, how do we make sure that they can succeed long-term? How do we create fair terms? How do we make sure that these fair terms are respected? I think everyone has a role to play if we're going to build a great innovation economy, starting with government policy, then moving to digital public infra, and also, the large corporates in the country saying that this is the time we need to be in deep, close strategic partnership with startups to make India a better economy.
Right. And of course, the budget is to be presented in just a few minutes from now. And that being said, of course, it's expected to contain measures to shore up weakening economic growth while also being fiscally prudent. Some would say that's going to be a difficult balancing act. And in layman terms, we've been talking about tax burden as well. When people pay less income, you would expect them to have more spending power. Do you think that's likely to shore up urban consumption?
So I believe it can, right? So I think the tax buoyancy has been good. Today, look at the GST numbers, look at the income tax numbers. We're nearing or more than 3% of GDP on each of these fronts. So this now gives us the opportunity, and I think the Prime Minister hinted about this when he spoke yesterday, that let's give more money in people's hands. The salary increases of late have not been as high as they were, 2-3 years ago. So this is a great opportunity for the government of India to continue to invest in physical infra, in digital infra, using the tax collections, but also to just put that little money back, right? So maybe your increment was not as high as you wanted, but because of what government of India does, now you have a little bit more money so that the consumption gets a pickup. I think it's a great opportunity both to talk about innovation and to put money back, right? A little bit of money back in salaried consumers' hands and in MSME hands via changes for inflation adjustment in all of the tax that we collect.
Absolutely. Well, Mr. Shetty, thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast with your insights on this. For latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.